The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists Andy Hoffman from Crypto Gold Central,
Thanks for having me here. Lots to talk about.
Gabriel D. Vine from Future Rant,
Hello, Bitcoin. Hello, posterity. Thanks for having me back.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network, reminding you to give us a thumbs up and a share so that more people will find the show. Moving on to issue 1, Blockchain Madness. The Consensus Convention took place this weekend in New York City, and it was wall-to-wall blockchain. Nearly every business in every space imaginable believes their data would be better managed by a decentralized ledger than their own centralized databases. Meanwhile, they agree nearly unanimously that the only impressive thing about Bitcoin is the blockchain, and that Bitcoin is not the blockchain's killer app. Andy Hoffman, I ask you, is this entire blockchain madness a snowstorm, an attempt to disguise the brilliance of Bitcoin from the people, to keep Prometheus's flame for themselves and usurp Bitcoin's place as blockchain's #1 killer app?
Well, if it were up to me, I would completely get rid of the word blockchain entirely. It is just an annoyance to the entire Bitcoin community. It is a source of misinformation for the rest of the world. And I think the people who are talking about it, the talking heads that get to be interviewed, are largely people that have no idea what it is or how it actually works. But it sounds cool to say that you're involved in blockchain. And when it comes to actual blockchains that do anything, as far as I see, Bitcoin is the only one. And I guess, yeah, maybe Ethereum and a few others do something. But for the most part, it's just buzz. And in some ways, it's a misdirection for people who are trying to get people away from Bitcoin. In other ways, it's just a way of showing your ignorance.
Gabriel D. Vine.
Yeah, this is really fun to watch. We have been talking about this stuff since 2014, right? That's when the powers that be, you might say, or powers that were, started to see that they were actually deer in the headlight. They had failed to innovate for so many decades with their banking system, especially in the US. And the specter of sound money reared its head in the form of Bitcoin's rise to prominence in 2013. And their multi-pronged attack, which included internal sort of, what you might call community attacks, which resulted in Bitcoin Cash or Bcash or Btrash as it's known. Shout out to Gestetner on the chat. And the other prong of the attack was just a straight up attempted what you might call a usurpation, but strictly in a rhetorical sense. So a rhetorical usurpation of the technology. So spreading this meme, which is really a good name for it because it doesn't have any technical gravitas. So this meme of blockchain, not the blockchain, definitely not the Bitcoin blockchain, but blockchain in general. It's a complete joke. And it doesn't add up. And anytime a security researcher or a database expert or anybody actually has to go in and build one or actually researches it properly, they see that this is actually just a drag on your efficiency because you're a centralized company and you cannot benefit from the decentralization that Bitcoin features. And so what you're doing is just slowing down your existing databases for absolutely no gain. Or it's a situation where there's a consortium of businesses who are actually adversarial, but there's too few of them. If you have 1 million adversaries, then you can build a decentralized network like Bitcoin. But if you have 6 or 11 banking partners, then it's not decentralized enough. So they're still just as adversarial and competing against each other, but it doesn't have sufficient decentralization to protect any of the given people or parties in the system. So basically, this is all a complete, what you might call a red herring or a mirage. This is a mirage to sell consulting. And it's been very successful. You know, of course, they put a lot of money behind it because they wanted to try to stem the rise of Bitcoin. It's not going to work. It's not working. But the stem is a vague term, right? So it might be delaying it a little bit. So good for them, for delaying their total collapse. Meanwhile, hopefully for their sake, they're actually buying Bitcoin in the background. But meanwhile, you have all these clueless people outing themselves as technical naives, like Jack Ma. So basically, some jackass exec, non-technical exec comes into his office and says, "Hey, you know how we have all those problems with security and privacy?" Jack says, "Hell yeah, I have to pay off the Chinese government a lot of money for this crap, and we keep getting hacked." And his clueless exec says, "All you need is this magic solution. Bitcoin uses it, and that works. So then we can use it." And he says, "Great, it's going to be amazing." 4 years later, we've got what, 100, 200 billion spent, maybe not quite that much, 10, 20, 50 billion dollars, maybe even more spent on these pilot projects, and zero, as far as I know, there are zero that are actually used for I see now that he said it's guessed it there. I thought he was Dutch. Sorry about that, G. It's G. It's like a soft G, like in Jabriel. That's what I thought. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, there's none of them are really being used. There's like, oh, it's finally went live, and we had 2 transactions last month. It's things like that. So nothing has actually come out of this. It's been 4 solid years. Like they were already going to get started in the spring of 2014 with this bullshit. It was really started by that lady who invented some of the derivatives, which actually caused the 2008 meltdown. What was her name again?
Blythe Danvers.
Blythe Masters. Great name, Blythe Masters. Yes. Oh, fantastic name. I bet you her real name is Deborah McSlugelgog. Anyways, so yeah, it's been 4 years. There's nothing to show for it. This is a total joke, and all these people will be seen as absolute fools by historians.
Yeah. If I can add to that, I mean, I do think that Bitcoin and blockchain should be synonymous, because everything else is either a misdirection or, as Gabriel says, trying to sell consulting. When people ask, they say, "Oh my God, look at these smart companies, Microsoft and IBM and JP Morgan," who called Bitcoin a fraud, by the way, doing blockchain stuff. But the fact is, they're not really doing anything except misdirecting people or showing their ignorance, or passive aggressively attacking Bitcoin because it threatens them. And you're referring, Thomas, to this article where Jack Ma, the Alibaba guy, Alibaba is kind of the Chinese Amazon, saying bad things about Bitcoin. But if you read the article, he really doesn't say anything. It sounds like he has no clue what Bitcoin is, and he's too rich to care. And in this same article, it says, here's the high-profile Bitcoin bashers, right? Okay, everyone, so what do all these people have in common? Okay, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Bill Gates, Jamie Dimon, Jack Bogle, PayPal executive guy, the former Bundesbank president, and Jim
Are you
Cramer.
reading a list of enemies of Bitcoin?
Yeah, and Jim Cramer. So either you're someone who is completely tied into the legacy system, or are too rich to give a crap about Bitcoin. Because when people saying, "Oh my God, Bill Gates should short it to put his money where his mouth is," like, no, Bill Gates is worth $50 billion and counting. He could care less about Bitcoin, and he may have even been paid off. He may have been paid off. He may have been just told by someone, "Hey, can you help us out and just say bad things about Bitcoin?" Because he could care less about Bitcoin.
I'd like to mention a detail from this article. Buffett originally called Bitcoin rat poison, which we were all very pleased about and totally agreed with. Bitcoin was designed to kill the rats of the financial system.
Like him.
I don't know if I would call Buffett a rat, but certainly central banks are rats. But now this article says rat drug. So apparently somebody tipped him off to the fact that, rat poison is actually, they like that. So he's trying to call us now rats, that we're high on this. But we know what the real story is. It is actually rat poison, Warren.
Well, it's funny, Gabriel, that you'd mention a Mirage and a Potemkin village, because this reminds me a little of when they had Patton in Europe, and he had a whole second invasion force going. They had all these fake houses and these fake tanks, and they actually fooled Hitler for a long time that the invasion was coming from there, because why wouldn't they go with Patton? And if blockchain is the best idea about Bitcoin, why would these businesses waste their time with Bitcoin? For the last 4 years, Coinbase has obviously been wasting their time with Bitcoin when they could have got into blockchain. They could have been blockchaining everything. They missed their opportunity. Maybe that's why they keep adding new coins. And it's funny, as someone that's been in this for a little amount of time, it kind of seems seasonal. We already had a blockchain wave years ago before the altcoins, before the ICOs, and now we're back to another season of the blockchain mania. I don't know if it's going to blow over though this time. They have so much hype. They have commercials on television. I hear them all the time. IBM is blockchaining diamonds. The entire diamond problem is settled now. Blood Diamond, don't even rent that movie anymore. It's over. IBM has blockchain diamonds. Now, I used to think this was a good idea. I used to think I could put my blog on a blockchain, but then they explained to me how many people would have to mine it and how there'd have to be a token of value for my blog to protect my blockchain, and that this wouldn't work, right? No one wants to mine, token of value for Tom's blog. That's stupid. But these new blockchains where they don't have miners and they don't have tokens of value are just shared databases, right? They're really hard to edit, but they're not impossible to edit if you own all the people that are mining the database. And if you own all the people that are verifying the database, how is it hard to edit this database? Maybe I don't understand it. I want to understand it. IBM, send Watson to me, explain it to me. I'm not getting it. If it's all a fake thing, we're going to look back at this years from now and be like, how did all these smart people put all these millions of dollars into this obviously fake thing that some kid in his bedroom was shouting was fake? And we talked about over and over again, you need a token of value. You need decentralized miners. That's why the Bitcoin works. The only truth that Bitcoin tells us is how much Bitcoin you have. Like, it doesn't tell you if the diamonds are dirty or not. Sorry,
yeah, it's the combination of Nick Szabo's innovation of the hash-locked time database, which I believe is from around 96 and then 1996, and combining that with Adam Back's proof of work, which was originally designed for email spam. The combination of those two and several other clever cryptographic systems and elements is what makes Bitcoin special and what makes it work. Private quote unquote blockchains are really hash-locked time databases, hash-locked distributed databases, which were invented in 96. There's a reason why nobody was talking about them before Bitcoin. It's because they're not all that useful except for decentralized systems that also have proof of work. That's why when Bitcoin came out, it was suddenly like, wow, we now have use for this proof of work and hash-locked distributed database idea that's so clever sounding, but nobody really used it yet because they're only really useful in combination. So this is once again stripping it back out and saying that it's some sort of innovation. But even in 96, it wasn't that new of an idea. They had hashed database, sequential database entries since at least the early 90s.
Well, I saw something happen at my former firm. They sell bullion. And of course, the bullion business, you can look at the US Mint sales, it's dead. I mean, people don't buy gold anymore. The only buyers in the world right now are probably the Chinese and Russian governments because they don't realize that no one cares about it anymore. But the fact is, I saw the other day that my firm and probably others, they now have a blockchain product where you are somehow buying gold that is like digital, backed by the Royal Mint of Canada, on some kind of blockchain. And I'm thinking, but the whole point of buying gold is because, like Bitcoin, you hold it yourself. So how is a blockchain digitalized gold that is centralized by the Royal Bank of Canada something that is good for? I mean, it's so against why you would buy gold in the first place. It's just, and that's an application of quote blockchain, which shows you what a ridiculous mess it is. It makes no sense at all.
It's a trusted system for the gold tickets, and you can trust them not to print the gold tickets because they put them in a blockchain, but you can just print as many tickets as you want.
Yes, it's what they've already done with the derivatives destroying the gold market. Now it sounds like they're just adding more.
And they want to bring it all to Bitcoin. I'm so excited. Coinbase, sorry, they just announced that they're going to do high frequency Bitcoin trading, derivatives, high frequency trade. We need to get some CDOs. All the worst parts of finance we need to attach to Bitcoin immediately because we need to see if we can kill this sound money project, right? It keeps what will it take to kill this thing?
Did Coinbase really say that they were going to have high frequency trading?
Yep, they're optimizing their systems for high frequency trading.
What a horrible company!
High choice.
Horrible.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's like they have a. I mean, it really is. As much as they're a big company, and I tell people to use them for onboarding, they have a great recurring buy program. But it's like they have a big list of bad things we could do for Bitcoin. It's like have Bitcoin Cash on our system, have Ethereum and Ripple to confuse people when they could just be buy Bitcoin, 1, 2, 3, buy Bitcoin. Instead, they're like, here's a thing called cryptocurrencies that you don't understand at all. Now make a choice between 4 of them randomly. We're adding new ones every day, and we're the one easy place to buy Bitcoin. It's such a complicated message. Their message could be so smooth, but no, and they're going after different markets. They don't want the people. They want the high frequency. Gonna be great. But Gabriel, don't you feel like we're on an interesting path here where at first Bitcoin was this dirty rebel drug currency made by this loner in his basement as this revolutionary code, and Satoshi does it, but then now we're like, Satoshi invented the blockchain. The blockchain is the greatest business innovation since the dual ledger. It's amazing that it was invented by this dirty rebel for his drug business. Like, how does any of this make any sense with what they were saying years ago? Or they should just completely throw that out?
Well, they're in a tough spot because this thing's gunning for their power base. So really, I mean, it's an end run. It's exactly what Friedrich Hayek said. I believe it was in the early 70s. He said the only way we're going to be able to do this, get sound money again, it's not happening with gold backing. He told all his libertarian buddies, you guys are that's a pipe dream. Forget it. That's never happening. It still has a central point of failure. So it's never going to work. And the information theory behind it doesn't work because everyone's going to depend on that source. And so we're going to have to, the only way we can get the money creation back in the hands of private society, of the market, and private wealth holders is by some sly end run around that system. That's the only way. I have no idea how it's going to happen. That's exactly what Bitcoin is. Satoshi probably read that. He was a big fan of the Austrians, obviously. And so he said, look, this is my sly end run. It's a system with this computing system. They can't shut down the whole internet. They're too dependent on it as well. But also they can't shut down this thing because it's totally grassroots. It's like a mushroom or something. It's like, trying to fight mold or whatever. It's like the spores are everywhere. You're never going to stop that. And no matter how many derivatives and shit they build on top of it, because it's a solid foundation, there are those of us who can hammer our rebar into that root concrete and be part of the system and own our own private keys and transact on the blockchain, no matter how expensive it is. We're going to use that. I mean, we can build layers on top of it that have certain amounts of trust built in, tiny bits like Lightning Network or a ton like private trading, but that's not going to affect, you cannot affect that. So they're stuck. They're stuck. They're desperate. And that's why there's these logical inconsistencies, everything they say. And it's just all lies. And like we said earlier, a mirage, a Potemkin village is a great way to put it.
I'd like to consider, in Star Trek, where they're always talking about how they don't need money anymore, like their society is so advanced. And I think there's so many things that have occurred in Star Trek that actually have started to occur here technologically. And I'd love to know their explanation, because to me, if they had an episode about how the Star Trek world got that way, it might have something to do with a decentralized currency that took the power out of the 1%'s hand and into the 99%'s hand and made for a better society, because that's ultimately what this one and only Bitcoin blockchain is doing, is making a society that is dominated by a handful of warlords into one where everyone will have a chance to participate, in which case money will probably have a little less importance than it always has.
I think so. And it's also going to be uncool to have a great amount of wealth. People will be able to see it in your wallet and they'll see that it's doing nothing, just sitting there. It's going to be more cool to donate it to projects and have a wallet that's linked to large donations to many projects, like the Pineapple Fund recently. It was an excellent example of a Bitcoiner who became rich, had too much money, and then gave away like $25 million, $1 million to each project. But I wanted to save some of this for the Bitcoin energy project later and talk more about Bitcoin inevitability. But like Gabriel said, being anonymous is a huge point for Satoshi. This is V for Vendetta level thinking. Everyone needs to go home and rewatch that movie and see how he has every little thing put together. Everything is planned out. You say, how can someone do that? You say, but Satoshi did that. Everyone wants to know who he is. The most important question is in Bitcoin is, who is Satoshi, and does he still have access to those original private keys? Maybe he can be my friend, right? Every reporter, every task line, everyone's like, why can't we stop talking about Satoshi? And it's because he has 1 billion private keys or whatever it is. It's not acceptable. They're probably destroyed. He's probably never coming back. But again, the foresight that it takes to do this, the forethought, and then the planning, and then to not break years and years and years. But let's move on to the next topic. First, the exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being nothing, zip, 0, bupkis, and 10 being absolute metaphysical certitude, how certain are you that this latest wave of blockchain hysteria will blow over? Andy Hoffman.
Well, first of all, props for bringing up V for Vendetta, because that was my favorite movie before I even heard about Bitcoin. That is just, everyone should watch it just because it's so amazing. And yes, it's so relevant for Bitcoin because of the decentralized movement that beats the 1%. But how
power of an idea. You
yes,
cannot stop an idea.
That's right. And it's the guy who plays V. He's the guy who actually plays Mr. Smith in the Matrix movies. And no one knows that because he doesn't talk with that elegant voice in his other roles. But anyway, how confident am I that this blockchain hysteria will pass? A lot closer to 10 than to 1, because I don't think there's really any use for almost everything that's being talked about. Not everything, but just about everything.
Gabriel Devine. Blow over. Let me think. I think there is a chance that there could be other blockchains besides Bitcoin that are relevant someday. But as far as this corporate private blockchains thing, 10.
The answer is 7. They'll keep talking about it. It will keep not making sense, but they get a lot of money and they're all paid. Moving on to issue 2, Bitcoin slumps. The price of Bitcoin has declined recently. While many were expecting a bump from the consensus conference, no bump came. And then the fledgling cryptocurrency actually fell from challenging $10,000 to challenging $8,000 the other way. Gabriel Devine, what is the reason for Bitcoin's continuing price woes?
Well, I'm sure Zero Hedge has found the reason. They always love to report on why Bitcoin makes its moves. So I'm going to say that Zero Hedge knows the reason, and it's probably something to do with some guy with a pickaxe in Mongolia poking the ground slightly, and he made a small leak in a pipe, and somebody got worried in the next village over and sold their goat. And that's why the price went down, according to Zero Hedge.
We also would have accepted Bill Gates or any other rich, old, smart person saying Bitcoin is no good. Andy Hoffman.
Well, first of all, that's hilarious, Gabe, that you brought up Zero Hedge, because I've had an ongoing feud with, quote, Tyler Durden for 10 years. He hates my guts. He's blocked my, I can't even, he thinks that I want to see his Twitter feed, but I'm blocked. And I've called him out from way back when for doing the same kind of thing with gold, just absolutely inane reporting, always making up reasons for everything. And it seems like, by the way, that he Tyler Durden, or whatever you want to call him, he doesn't seem as antagonistic about gold anymore, probably because his clients, who are all the mainstream, ironically, the mainstream media and politicians, don't care about gold anymore. Now it's Bitcoin where he's after. It's the same kind of thing. He always has an absolutely ridiculous reason for it. It's usually completely wrong. It's always out of date. It's the titles are set up to make things look bad. It's no different than what you get from Wall Street, the same people who are talking about blockchain that are attacking Bitcoin. But look, the reason, and today I talked about it in my audio blog. I'm just exhausted from fighting, about why it moves every given day. The fact is, a year ago it was 1,000. Today it's 8,000. Everything is great in Bitcoin world. But if you want to say, what is the reason? I mean, this is, as I called it, the biggest pink elephant in the history of Bitcoin pink elephants. This is the Mt. Gox whale. I mean, it's pretty obvious. He moved 16,000 coins on April 25th. There were no sell-offs then, so obviously he didn't sell anything then. But then a couple of days later, on a Monday morning, all of a sudden, just as we were at 10,000, the price started selling off massively. And then when it got up to 9,400 again, he moved another 8,000 coins, and an hour later, a free fall plunge that lasted for like 2 weeks. So the problem, the biggest problem is not that he's selling this Bitcoin, because it's really not worth that much. I mean, it's about $200 million worth, and he's only got a little more than $1 billion left. But the way he's doing it, as he did it back in January and December, no one has any idea how much he has left. He's just indiscriminately dumping. No one knows when it's coming. He's not using the OTC markets, obviously, so we don't know what's going on. And in a time,
now, Andy, what would be a correct way for him to sell it? Describe an optimal solution.
Right. Well, you would do what you do on Wall Street when you have an illiquid position, a large illiquid position that's being sold for non-fundamental reasons. You have brokers market the deal as an auction. It's very simple. If he went to Coinbase, Kraken, pick a couple, pick Cumberland, Genesis, the big OTC brokers, and say, I want you to tell your clients that I have a block for sale from the Mt. Gox wallet that's being sold for non-fundamental reasons. They could, in 24 hours or maybe 2 days, because it's Bitcoin, it's a little less liquid than stocks, they could sell the whole thing, no problem. But it's very nefarious the way it's done. It's very untransparent.
And if they did that, it wouldn't affect the market, because new money would come in and be originally traded for this. The problem with what they're doing is it affects the market, right? There's a certain number of buys and sells, and when they flood in with their sells, it wipes out all the buys.
Yeah, because let's face it, in Bitcoin, the land of FUD, there's always a fear in the back of everyone's minds that there's something that we don't know. So when you see the price plunge, we go, oh, something just happened, we don't know. Whereas it would never happen in the stock market, because it's a lot more transparent. So especially now, we just came off of this big bear market. People have in their mind the fear of big giant crashes. They also have seen that what the Mt. Gox wallet has done. So they're terrified. And when they see the price plunging, it just begets more selling. But if they were transparent about it and just said, this is what we're doing, the big institutions would say, yeah, let me in. I want to buy this, because it's being sold at a discount for a reason that has nothing to do with what's wrong with Bitcoin. And so again, until sentiment changes, this Mt. Gox trustee is going to have an impact on the market. The thing is, though, that the more that he sells and the less he has left, the more that the institutions get emboldened. And if I'm hearing this correctly, this lawsuit may wind up being settled sometime later this year, at which point then the institutions are really going to be like vultures jumping in, because they know that the selling is going to end soon. And I really do believe that this is the #1 reason why the prices had trouble going up.
And again, to confirm, this is just the absolute worst way to do this. He's getting less money for the people he's selling the coins for. He's crashing the market. Maybe the people with a large amount of money are getting some cheap coins. That's the only person I really see benefiting from this, other than the fact that if there is a rule in the Japanese court that he has to sell X number of coins by Y day, he's accomplishing that, right? He's fulfilling his governmental function, right?
Yeah.
This is a classic libertarian thing you guys would love to tee off on here. It's a government functionary carrying out his task blind to the other causes.
And the last thing I'll say about this is, when you talk about the stock market, there's all kinds of insider trading rules and regulations, but in crypto, there's absolutely none. And for all we know, he could be colluding with the Bank of Japan or anyone, say, look, I'm selling this. This is what I'm going to be doing. And people can get in and front run, because there's no rules. Heck, it's not even the United States. We're talking about there are people in all different countries in the world that have absolutely no rules of insider trading to start with, let alone in crypto. So this is just an ugly situation where, whether it's being done overtly or covertly or inadvertently, that this is a giant mess. I mean, it's not a coincidence that he started taking he literally started taking the coins out of the wallet December 17th at the peak. And until this very recent, where it's April 25th and May 10th, The last coins he took out were February 6th, where he took 8,000 out, and that was the low of the market. So it's quite obvious that, I wrote a crypto audio blog I did the other day saying, will 2018 be the year of the Mt. Gox trustee? It very well might be, but if this case ends in 2018 and they actually resolve it, he'll be out by the end of the year, and it'll be a distant memory in the rearview mirror.
All right, Gabriel Devine, do you have more on that, or should we move on to the exit question?
Bitcoin changes over time.
That it does. And now, exit question. The price of Bitcoin this time, next week. Gabriel Devine, higher or lower?
I'm going to continue my 100% record and getting these exactly right every single time by saying higher, as usual.
Andy Hoffman.
I am going to say it will be the same, because these forces, it's hard to say when sentiment will change. And as long as this Mt. Gox trustee is there doing this, or people think that he's there doing this and that the next shoe is about to drop, it's going to be hard for a sustained, look, you see what happens every time it goes up now, it's immediately absorbed. And I believe that that's him. And so I think that there's going to be tremendous institutional support, because Bitcoin is Bitcoin and it's worth a lot more than it is. So I think these forces are going to be fighting each other for a while until we get a little resolution. So I will say the same.
Oh, the same push. I'm going to go with lower, but I'm also always wrong about this. But if I know that I'm always wrong about this, I'm not even sure if I'm predicting anything. Moving on.
You would give me the poison if you were sitting there, so I'll take the left glass.
Exactly. Never mess with the Sicilian when death is on the line. Check out the World Crypto Network podcast at worldcryptonetwork.com or on iTunes. We've got more than the World Crypto Network. We've got Tone Vase, Jimmy Song, Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Noted podcast show, and much, much more. Check out the World Crypto Network podcast and subscribe today. Issue 3, with great power comes great responsibility. The media is back again this week with another study based upon entirely speculative numbers that expresses in a panicked voice that Bitcoin mining is using too much electricity. The headlines vary, often comparing Bitcoin energy production to a small country such as Ireland or Austria. Are these doomsayers correct? Is the demand for Bitcoin so great that the miners will stop at nothing, eventually using up all of the world's energy to mine Bitcoin while the world burns in a sick allegory to infinite jest that only I will get? Andy Hoffman, I ask you.
This reminds me, as in gold, we'd have all of the most pathetic propaganda memes that would come out, mostly to people who either hate gold or don't know anything about it or care. But my favorite was, you can't eat gold. Like you shouldn't own gold because you can't eat it. And some people would actually take this, like Warren Buffett. It's not practical. You can't eat it, as a reason why it's bad. And in this case, this has become one of the de facto, the go-to reasons why Bitcoin is so bad. And it's ridiculous. First of all, this very study, I was reading the article you talk about, and yes, they say Ireland. Well, Ireland uses 0.1% of the world's electricity. So they're saying basically Bitcoin uses 0.1% of the energy. This is absolutely horrible. And then it goes on to say that by the end of this year, it's going to triple. So first of all, if it's going to triple by the end of the year, it says that there's a lot of interest in Bitcoin for a negative article about Bitcoin, but it says it's going to triple to, quote, almost 0.5% of global electricity output, as if this is like some giant thing. But more importantly, the whole point is that Bitcoin is going to be replacing things. It's going to be replacing banking functions that use astronomical amounts of electricity. In fact, if they get their wish of all these blockchain things, it's going to be replacing all kinds of industrial businesses that use massive amounts of electricity. So again, to me, this is the equivalent of you can't eat gold.
Gabriel Devine.
First off, I'd like to say that I also read Infinite Jest. Really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of David Foster Wallace. And I'm coming at you, bro. And so let's talk infinite jest for a second here. I'm actually very curious about your analogy. I am trying to parse the metaphor, you might say. I'm assuming
I'm
the
going
metaphor
straight at the movie, right?
Yeah. Obviously the movie that is so riveting that it turns the viewers into vegetables. They basically become totally catatonic upon viewing this video for more than a few seconds or whatever.
And Bitcoin mining is so addictive and so profitable that we would give up all other industries to run Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, and that's exactly what would happen. Yeah, that's okay. I get it. I thought that's what you're going for. That's good. I'm sharp. Yeah. So I totally agree with Andy that this is a matter of replacement, right? And this is what is so maddening and idiotic about, once again, this propaganda. It's once again a total mirage. Like even there's an idiot in our chat who thinks that it's a bad PR for Bitcoin, that it uses energy. You need to do more studying, Mr. whatever your name is. I can't pronounce it. It starts with a Y. So get your act together and start reading up on exactly what's going on here. The existing banking and financial ecosystem, or I wouldn't call it an ecosystem, financial industry, is not only way ballooned and huge, way bigger than it needs to be because of just fiat printing and being out of control, but also it is very difficult to measure. So you'll notice that Timothy B. Lee, who is known for his very superficial and stupid articles about Bitcoin, you'll notice that he doesn't discuss the replacement at all. It's because they don't want to acknowledge that this is gunning for their lunch. The only guy who said it is Jamie Dimon. He said, "Oh, they're going to try to eat our lunch, but I'm not going to let them," or whatever. At least he understands that that's the point of this system, is to destroy him. This is to destroy fractional reserve banking and central banking. And so Bitcoin, the miners and Bitcoin are out to destroy all of the lights and air conditioning and all the money and the accounting and everything, all the people that are wasting their lives working for banks and central banks and economists, mainstream economists, lamestream economists. All of those people, all of the energy going toward that industry is meant to be totally cut off from them. If you replace them with the algorithmic equivalent, the decentralized, better sound money replacement, I guarantee you it'll be orders of magnitude less. And as what's his name, Michael Goldstein has said many times, the more the better. The more energy we're using for this, the stronger this ecosystem gets, and the faster we can move on from the horribly wasteful system that we have now. This article, not mentioning any of that, is what shows the bias very, very clearly. It's totally ridiculous and ludicrous.
Now, the way it looks to me is that Bitcoin is inevitable, and that there's this sense of Bitcoin inevitability out there. Why? I'm talking today a lot about old shows. I read an article where someone said they heard about Bitcoin on the Bitcoin group years ago when Andreas was on. And we were talking about the same things then that we're talking about now. And we're talking about them in the same way. And it's like, why were these smart guys, Andreas is smarter than everybody, but why were these smart guys able to pick this Bitcoin thing out and be so right about it? And it's because it's inevitable. And I think when everybody rejects it at first, they go away from it, they leave it, they come back to it later, they see something has changed, something's different about the project, and they understand it and that it's going to be this way. When I first got the MP3 in 1997, I used a command line program to compress a wave that was huge, like 200 megs, to an MP3 that was small, like 15 megs. And when I saw that happen for the first time, the light bulb went on. Music was over. All of music was over, and it didn't matter how they flexed it around, how they did it. Eventually, the iTunes system with streaming, Spotify with streaming, all again using the MP3, using this compression technology, changed music. The artists have to tour now, and they survive by merch. In the same way, Bitcoin's going to change the banking industry. It doesn't matter if we want it to or not. We can resist it. We can make it hard for Bitcoin to do this. We can succumb to it. We can make it easy for Bitcoin to do this. We can like the consequences or not, but the consequences are coming. The Bitcoin's going to change banking. It's going to replace the stock market. All these different things are all going to be digital and on Bitcoin now. Like Gabriel said, all these jobs, all these brick and mortar, all these armored cars, they all burn fuel too. No one's calculating in the waste of the current system. Also, it allows you to borrow endless amounts of money for war. Nobody talks about this anymore because they'd rather talk about the blockchain and their supply chains. But sound money doesn't allow you to print excess money for war. Now, this does change things. It's going to make it harder to get into space. It's going to make it harder to do large road projects. There's certain credit problems we haven't figured out yet on the sound money Bitcoin system. But once again, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. It doesn't matter if these challenges eliminate your business. No one cares. Bitcoin doesn't care. It's not going to change. It's like the internet for email, what it did for snail mail, what it did to the fax machine. These are the banks now. That's why they're upset. That's why they're fighting this with the Bitcoin and the energy and the blockchain. So, okay, I went off on a thing. Let's go on to the exit question, which is also another thing. When the printing press was invented, did people fret that they would run out of ink? Did we not go to the moon because spaceships required too much metal? Is this all just a replay of the Red Flag Act, the outrage against the internet, and all of the other nonsense that comes with a changing of the guard? Can the old world simply not understand the new world's ideas? Andy Hoffman.
I'm not sure what the question is, but yes, the early adopters are the ones who get it, and everyone else comes in way after when they realize this inevitability that they wish that they had saw earlier on. And in the meantime, the propaganda, the lies, the misinformation are hot and heavy from those that are threatened by it and from general ignorance. So yes, and again, I can't emphasize, especially as I see now, it's one thing it gets a little mass, like let's say last fall, where everyone seems to be into Bitcoin and crypto, and everyone's calling my company, how can you help me? I need to do this. But you realize that all that really was just people who saw prices go up and wanted to buy things. And now that things have leveled off, you see that there's literally, it's like crickets. Like so few people have any knowledge or interest in this. And so we're in a scenario where it's just right for these kind of things to be put out there. These ridiculous things like too much energy and blockchain. But the fact is that it is inevitable, and we are way early. I mean, I think, when I think of Vortex saying early days, I think that more than ever, as I see just the landscape right now. But eventually everyone will have to come around to it.
I also like the way there's always some old rich tech guy that they haven't asked about Bitcoin yet. They're like, oh, we asked the inventor of the Etch-a-Sketch about Bitcoin and he doesn't like it. Oh, that's bad. That's bad. Gabriel T. Vaughn.
That was really good. The Rubik's Cube guy says Bitcoin's going down to $10.
It's shocking that he doesn't like it.
Erno Rubik.
Yeah, right. He knows who it is. Hungarian.
Yeah.
I think that I loved your rant, Thomas. It's really good to hear. And, it's absolutely a one-to-one analogy with these earlier industrial turnovers. I mean, you look at the invention of the automated loom or whatever that thing was in the late 18th century, and then that was where we have the term Luddite from, right? It was this guy Ludd put together his buddies that were all, it was like a home. It was a wonderful thing. These people in the English countryside could make a good living by knitting stuff in their house or whatever the hell they were doing. And suddenly this thing was like, 170 times more efficient than, some housewife. And then they're smashing the factory, right? They think that by being violent or releasing propaganda, I think they know that the game is up, and they're just trying to push it off as long as they can so that they can hodl, so they can get a position in this new system and pretend like they're not, and just keep the price low so they can sell as much of the old crap like banks and stocks, and get as much of the new stuff as possible. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's inevitable.
I forget what movie or what science fiction concept it was, but there's an idea. Oh, it's Doctor Who. It's the new Doctor Who where you can look around the room and still not see it. That it's hiding there in plain sight. If it's pointed out to you, be like, oh, that blue ball right there. But otherwise, you can't see it. And I think that's what it's like for Bitcoin. They can't see how useful it is, how it's like a Swiss Army knife, how it uses all these different tools together, how it's unbreakable in all these different ways. And the more you try to break it, the more it responds and the more it adapts. And they can't understand that. And once again, their jobs, their lifestyle, their entire history, everything that they've ever known demands this system must exist. And let's think about the music producers. Think about the people in the middle of this thing when music was a big deal. We were selling lots of albums or calling radio stations to get the album on the air. They thought that system would go on forever too. You thought you would be a banker all of your life. That might not be the case. And yes, they're in shock, they're in denial, they're fighting it, they're blockchaining it, all these different things. Some are adapting. They're like, maybe we can run our business on Bitcoin or get some high frequency trading or get any of that stuff in there. But again, it doesn't matter. It's inevitable. It's not that I'm not making it inevitable. I'm not declaring it so. I'm saying that it simply is. I'm not saying that I like that or that I'm against it or I'm in favor of it. Like sound money is here. Bitcoin is here. It's anonymously created. It's being mined in a unknown, decentralized, essentially not perfect, but getting better manner, and it won't go away. So yeah, you have to adapt to it or you have to be in denial of it. And you have to see how long that's going to go. I know a lot of people said, oh, I'm not going to get a computer. I'm just going to wait and I'm going to die instead. And if you're not going to get Bitcoin and you're just going to wait and you're going to die instead, that's fine. But that's a very dark and sad choice. And time is running out for you to get Bitcoin. And even $10, $20, you have to buy a whole coin. You can just get in on this and learn how to use it, like email in 1995, but you didn't have anyone to email. Moving on to issue 4, Chinese popularity contest. The Chinese government, which has banned the trading of cryptocurrencies, doesn't seem to mind rating them, releasing a new list of crypto ratings by CCID Research, China's Ministry of Industry and Informational Technology. As usual, with information released by the People's Republic of China, the list can be taken entirely at face value and trusted implicitly. The list rates Ethereum first, with Steem and Lisk quick behind. Bitcoin is ranked 13th, tied with Verge, which used to be called Dogecoin Dark. Gabriel D. Vine, is the Chinese rating system accurate? Does Bitcoin belong 13th?
You know, this brings to mind an interview that I conducted on this very channel back in the summer of 2016. It was the first Future Rant interview. I've only done a few, and it was with a gentleman by the name of Vinay Gupta, who was actually a project manager for the launch of Ethereum, which I got to hand it to him. You know, it was a pretty big project, and they pretty much got it out on time. So I would imagine he was an excellent project manager, probably. But he, in part 3 of that interview, Mr. Gupta was vehement and angry and yelling about how the Chinese mining being so concentrated for the Bitcoin ecosystem in China, the mining industry being so concentrated in China was a reflection on Bitcoin's politics. I don't know what his point was exactly. He was not he didn't make much sense in my opinion. But his basic point was like that I was denying that China has a authoritarian regime because I thought that the Bitcoin mining ecosystem would re-decentralize, which doesn't follow, in my opinion. He didn't really back up that opinion. And I wonder what he thinks now that China just absolutely loves Ethereum. Maybe he is insulted, thinks it's an attack, or maybe he loves it because he is himself a Maoist by his own admission. So I think this is total bullshit.
Can't Ethereum just say no to that? Can't they just say, no, China, we don't want your love? and send it
You
back.
know, Vitalik Buterin, the you know, what you might call the poster child for Ethereum, the originator, had actual meetings with Vladimir Putin. So I'm a little confused about Gupta, who says he's a Maoist, but then he says, oh, you know, China is authoritarian. And then, you know, the guy that he worked with to launch the system is openly meeting with an oligarch over in Russia, which I don't know if that's, I guess that's okay. But if you're, I don't know, it doesn't make much sense to me.
I'm not sure I'm ready to go completely down the Gupta rabbit hole, but I will agree that we have a little bit of a William Gibson type situation going on where China mining Bitcoin early, making Bitmain into a $4 billion company, could affect the entire future of the world. I don't know if Bitmain becomes Tesher Asproul and that they start doing artificial intelligence like they said they want to. They want to make Bitcoin miners, but for artificial intelligent tasks, like a cloud of AI miners. I don't know more than that, but it could really change things. $4 billion, the investments they're making now into other crypto companies. I don't know what to think about it, but there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of like something's, and that could have been American money. Americans could have mined it. They could have gotten energy deals. We have Hoover dams. Canada could have gotten it. Iceland could have gotten it. A lot of other countries could have jumped on this, but China had whatever it was to make it work.
That's a good side point that we didn't even bring up in the energy discussion, which is that the Bitcoin mining industry is very quickly going very sustainable energies, unlike the, you know, banks and traditional finance. I mean, I guess some of Manhattan gets its energy from Niagara or whatever, but you know, the Bitcoin is an incredible resource for energy producers because they can have miners come in and utilize this extra energy that would totally go to waste otherwise. Instead, it's securing the most, you know, secure, decentralized, useful money system, you know, created ever.
They also said with the Canada situation, instead of storing the power in batteries, which are scarce, you could mine Bitcoin at the hydro source, store the money in Bitcoin. Now the electricity has become money. But let's get Andy Hoffman in here. What do you think about all this China and Ethereum,
Right.
and Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, it's, you know, there's this kind of common knowledge that China is like going to take over the world and be like the next great superpower. But with each passing day, I just have I downgrade my opinion of them and see them as still kind of almost a bumbling Cuban style, you know, communist country that just is getting in their own way, especially now that, you know, you got people like Trump that are really challenging them and the things that they've been doing. It's, you know, just because they own a lot of our debt, that doesn't mean they're going to rule the world. And when it comes to the decisions that they've made in Bitcoin, which is, you know, potentially the future of money, the future of so many things, is just like they are shooting themselves in the foot. They're, you know, banning exchanges. We're going to stop giving subsidies to miners. I mean, do they not realize that right next door to them are Japan and Korea, which are like the two most Bitcoin savvy nations in the world and may very well be acquiring it, especially the Japanese? I mean, they are just, it's unbelievable the way that they act and the stupid things that they say and do at a time where they could take control. And they should know better because clearly their government has a very good idea of what Bitcoin is and how it works. Now, as for what we're talking about here, this, you know, rating Ethereum the best blockchain, even though it's had all these problems, and Bitcoin number 13, which is, I don't think it's a coincidence, the unlucky 13 that they picked that one. There's a theme here. The theme of this whole show today has been that in this time of this lull of weakness in prices where people are not interested, all the propaganda is coming out. We talk about the energy. Everyone's out again with the it costs too much energy, and I said it's like the you can't eat gold. And the blockchain. Everyone's talking about the blockchain. That's so great. Just because they're just attacking Bitcoin and pretending that there's other stuff out there when there isn't. But to me, this you know, rating Ethereum number 1 and Steam number 2 and Bitcoin number 13. I mean, this is like taking 1984 and Atlas Shrugged and V for Vendetta and what was it, that movie Brazil, and putting them all together into the most inane, asinine thing ever. And this is like a government of like a big country telling everyone that the only blockchain is the 13th best. This is absolutely unbelievable that anyone could read this and take anything that China says seriously.
And if you were an Ethereum booster, would you be bragging about this? Would you be going around saying China says Ethereum's the best, or Steam or Lisk or any of these smaller coins? This is great news for you, right?
Yeah. By the way, good for Steam. I continue to be a supporter of Steam because I think it's one of the few ways that, you're talking about in the music industry, it's impossible to get paid anymore. Well, I'm in the blogging industry. It's very hard to get paid. Steam is one of the few ways that people can put out content and actually get paid for it. So I'm not sure how to rate their blockchain, but I do think that it's useful. And especially when you have some of these, these corporate titans like Google demonetizing people for trying to put out content. I think it's great that there's an alternative out there, but I doubt that it's the number 2 blockchain compared to number 13 Bitcoin.
Andy, apparently you haven't checked out Tone's coverage of Steam's white paper from a couple of years ago. He very, very extensively notated what a fucking scam that is. So you might want to have a look at that.
Yeah, we basically gonna say it's like a greater fool theory.
No, but I'm not talking about buying it. I don't buy Steam, but I can get paid.
Yeah, but by creating content, you are giving your effort and labor and donating that time and labor to that project, and encouraging people by giving your excellent content to that system, encouraging other people to lose their money on this horrible scam, and also by making the founders 9 to 1 on every token that's created.
But I'm not telling people to buy Steam. It's like what Adam Meister said from the beginning. He's the one who told me about it. Don't buy it. Earn it.
Well, you are once again, you are donating your labor, which is even more valuable than buying it, in my opinion, because I think you're an excellent media creator.
Yeah. Well, what I'm finding is that it's not as valuable content anywhere, and it's the same thing with the music industry. People have to go with the times. But again, I'm not endorsing. I never endorse buying altcoins. I do believe that they're here to stay, and some of them are going to play a role in the future. But as far as I don't look at it. There's capitalism out there. If people want to buy stuff, that's their prerogative. I just know that it serves a useful purpose, and there's very few altcoins. I shouldn't say okay. There's very few blockchain projects that serve any purpose at all, and this is one of them that does. But I'm not talking about. Yes, I understand the founders printed themselves money and they can hand it out to people, but that's no different than Ethereum and all these other ones. So I'm not endorsing anything.
At least Steam created a whole bunch of long form content. If you like long form content, if you like blog entries, as an ICO or a blockchain or whatever, a greater fool theory, whatever it may be, it did create this content. So it's kind of like if the book was created from this process, but you still really like the book, and somehow we have to create the art.
Yeah. Again, it's two different. I'm not talking about the cryptocurrency Steam. I'm talking about the platform. Steam it, I think, is great. That's all. Two different things.
I think it's part of a larger philosophical issue where whether or not you can be a part of something without promoting it, or whether by being a part of something you are promoting it. I think that's really what we're talking about. There's different levels to that. Tone has his own level. Gabriel has his own level. Andy and I have our levels.
Right. Well, it's the same thing with like B Rhodium, right? I got it for free. Hasn't started trading it. I like it. And people get mad at me. How could you like it? It's an altcoin. Well, for one, I actually like the concept behind it, but the fact is I am part of it. So should I hate it? What should I do? I mean, I hated Bcash, got rid of that quickly. This, I don't even have it yet. Like it hasn't even started trading, but like you said, there's, I'm not telling anyone to buy anything. I'm just saying my view of what Steam it does, and that has nothing to do with the value of the Steam currency, which I have no opinion on.
All right, let's move on to the exit question, which is a different topic altogether. The Chinese government are also rating their people using a Facebook-like app to track their activities on social networks, as well as in the real world using facial recognition. To many, the program is simply an Orwellian nightmare. But from another perspective, perhaps the Chinese are simply trying to teach citizenship and good manners to their people, although in a harsh and perhaps corrosive way. However, the technology remains agnostic. Will the same be tried here? Will we eventually be tracked and rated by our app, our friend, and the eye in the sky? Go to Gabriel D. Vine.
That is a very thought-provoking paragraph there. I was reading along. I got the script before the show. Very nice. Well, I don't buy the idea that they're trying to teach citizenship and good manners. This is obviously an Orwellian nightmare. It's just straight up. But will we be eventually tracked and rated by an app? That is a difficult question, and I actually have explored that a little bit on my blog a few years ago. I do think that in some cases, or in a lot of cases, we might have a situation where surveillance becomes so totally ubiquitous that it's unavoidable. In other words, floating cameras just everywhere to the point where you just can't hide anything. And that's not even to mention the sort of woo-woo crazy stuff like remote viewing and all these type of things that are kind of hidden from the public. Most people don't believe in it. People believe that. I think it's propaganda that it doesn't exist, but actually I think all of our minds are actually connected to the whole, and we can actually access that stuff, which means that once again, with enough skill, such a person, or maybe everybody will be telepathic and stuff, and there won't even be such a thing as privacy anymore, in which case we wouldn't have as much in the way of private property and things. That would be maybe something moving toward a Star Trek world. But on the other hand, I think that you can also develop blocking, where you can't read my mind anymore. You can't, I've got a Faraday field around me, or a wall of a block of force or whatever. I could cast a magic spell or whatever it is, and your machines can't see me anymore. And I think that's maybe more where we're heading, where surveillance and anti-surveillance are both ubiquitous, and there's a constant fight for information. As we have seen throughout the latter half of the 20th century and into our century, the value of information as we transition from the industrial age into the information age, the value goes up and up and up. Now we even have money that's just made out of information, technically speaking. So I think that will be true in an even more literal sense in the future. However, I believe that this process of extremely powerful extremely powerful technologies coming into the hands of individuals more and more. We're 3D printing guns, then we'll be able to 3D print, all sorts of crazy stuff from the web, that we're going to trade physibles with each other and be able to print up the most incredible weapons. And then everybody will be making all these, armor and defensive things to protect against the weapons, just like we protect against the surveillance. And I think that what that's going to mean is that the information wants to flow and the secrets get out, and the ability to keep secrets in large organizations like governments is going to crumble. And so we won't have surveillance states anymore. It'll just be the surveillance society, and everybody will be fighting each other for information and cooperating with each other on information, just like we do now with collaborative projects. And I think that's really the direction we're going to go, because we won't have coercive paradigms to shunt us into forced behaviors. We're going to have voluntary interaction. It's going to be far more stuff like that. There will still be skirmishes and there will be fights and things, but I think we're going to have a much more of a network society, as David Orban calls it. And we are going to have those type of ratings things. Some people will opt out. Some people, you'll need a reputation to participate in certain systems, like, for example, a decentralized Uber, things like that. So that's my general thought. I think by the mid-century, we're going to have a world like this, where we're going to have micro sort of villages, and at the biggest, you'll have like a city-state will be the largest sort of government, what we would think of as a government now. But even those won't have the same power, because it'll be so easy to opt in and opt out that they will be at the mercy of the citizens, not the other way around.
Well, I do want to say first that I don't think you need telepathy to destroy privacy. It'll happen on its own. And I do fear the world becoming like Minority Report, where he walked around and there was these ads popping in at him, and the ads all knew who he was and they knew what he bought and they knew how to sell to him. And like Gabriel's saying, you might need some kind of portable Faraday cage to carry around with you to keep these signals out while they're going to try to break in, and back and forth, this constant struggle for privacy. It needs to be two-sided though. A few years ago, everyone was ready to give up their privacy. They were all post-privacy. They were on Facebook and they didn't care. Now people are starting to realize what they're giving away and that it does have a value, and that Facebook and Google took that value and didn't, gave you back the ability to look at your stuff, but not much else. But on the Chinese government thing, I want to remind you, I try to see it from their perspective. If you have a bunch of people spitting on the street because they're farmers and they came to the city and they don't know any better, and the spitting is causing a major health problem, and you as a government need to stop them from spitting, and you've got this app where you can reward people who don't spit and you can punish people that do, and you can use their social network to punish people who are friends with spitters, and you can ostracize them and you can improve your society. I know it sounds a bit absurd, but maybe it improves your society. I don't know that. Like, I don't know how to manage a large scale society from the top down, like I presume that the Chinese are trying, which is why they have this kind of tool. I think that's the reason why they have it, but I could be wrong on that too. Let's go to Andy Hoffman, your perspective on the Chinese government and their Facebook-like social media tool.
Well, it's just like the movie horrible movie, The Circle, the one with Tom Hanks.
It's a great book. It's a great book, but a horrible movie. Read the book.
Yeah, it was a horrible movie. But that's the whole point, that they see into everything in your life. And of course, in Minority Report, they even have I forgot that these telepaths that can see what you're going to do and punish you for what you are going to do in the future. Look, of course, the world is going to be more surveillance. The whole NSA thing and Ed Snowden and all that it's only going to get worse. But the beauty of it is that Bitcoin is kind of like the antidote to it. It's their kryptonite, especially because, we talk about now how, it doesn't have much privacy, but it will, starting with the Lightning Network. And eventually it'll take all the best privacy features from all the privacy coins, because as the governments try to surveil more, the cryptocurrencies will be able to fight them back even more. And eventually this whole decentralized revolution is going to make it harder and harder for governments to do that. So that, where once the future was thought to be Orwellian, as it turns out, it's going to be a lot more decentralized. I'm not sure how long it'll take, but Bitcoin is really the reason that all this time changed. Like, it's like, you go back in time in like Star Trek and you do one thing and it changes the whole future. Well, Bitcoin is changing the future from centralized to decentralized. So a lot of those evil visions are not going to come to pass because of Bitcoin and all of the cryptocurrency revolution that comes with it. It's very exciting. It'll take a long time, but it will definitely happen that way. It's just the how and when.
The nightmare is that it's worst right now. This is the Orwellian nightmare. Like you said, I totally agree with Andy. Very well said. Snowden and all this is the Orwellian nightmare. We're in the worst of it. It's going to go just for a few more years until Bitcoin takes it out.
And I think it's a fitting image to end on. I'm kind of picturing the Macintosh commercial where she throws that flame at the screen, and that could have been Bitcoin that she was throwing, not just the Macintosh. So let's go to predictions or story of the week. Andy, do you have anything important happen this week? Anything we didn't talk about? Go ahead.
Oh my God, I forgot that you do the story of the week. Do I have a story? My head is spinning.
Sing.
Yeah.
We can see if Gabriel's ready too.
Yeah.
One more chance.
I won't say a story, but I will say that I want it into people's heads when they hear all kinds of FUD and all kinds of stories and issues and zero hedge, that it is a fact that the Mt. Gox trustee is a major player in the markets right now. So a lot of times when you're seeing price movements, they have a lot to do with what he's doing or not doing. And if you do, by the way, see, for instance, the price seeing support around here, as we've seen right now, of course, that could change anytime, you'll realize that it's institutions that are calling this guy out, because this is going to end this year. This lawsuit is going to end sometime in the next, let's call it 6 to 9 months. And when it does, we will see what the low of Bitcoin is, because I think that more and more people realize what an important issue this is right now.
All right, Gabriel Devine, prediction or story of the week.
My story, I haven't been on the show for a while, so I want to just catch up with everybody. I, have talked a lot about Cliff High. He's sort of a, what you might call an alchemist in a way. He's like a, he uses these algorithms, but it's very subjective, and he puts together these reports. And it's hard to say whether there's that much value in it, but I think he's a really interesting guy. And he made a prediction. He might take issue with calling it a prediction, but he did say that the price of $13,888 per Bitcoin was in his data for February. And not only was it below that, but it fell below that afterward. So, I just like to call, he made a string of insanely accurate price predictions in Bitcoin, extremely impressive for about 2 years straight. And that was a huge miss, as it was in his data for an entire year or something or more. And I will say that the exact center point of the bottom of the recent bottom that we had, I guess that was in March or something, the double bottom at 6,000 something, and the top, the exact halfway point is pretty much exactly 13,800 something. So that's interesting, but it was I would definitely call that a huge miss on Cliff High's part. So watch out with your psychics.
I always like all the eights. It's good to see something with a lot of 8. And I just wanted to remind everyone that if you'd like, you could join the World Crypto Network Patreon. We've got a new Patreon account. We've got 11 patrons supporting us with $50 a month. So you can go ahead and pledge whatever you want to help support this show. And also, you could donate to the QR code on your screen with Bitcoin. That's right. We take Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin group. So thanks so much for watching. Go Knights, Las Vegas Golden Knights. And until next time, bye-bye.
Wait.